Welcome to Ill-Equipped History, where two best friends tell you something super cool from history. I'm Morgan, joined by my best friend, Emily.
Hi.
It's late, y'all, and we are still together, and I'm quickly running out of brain cells tonight.
I don't think I had any waking up this morning, so here we are. Put myself together today for this.
We did the thing, though. We did everything we needed to do, and we are wrapping everything up. So
we are. I mean, I'm proud of us.
I am too. Well, I feel like we've gotten a lot of our chatting done out of the way, unless you have anything else you would like to share.
Not particularly. Like and share us. I'm going to say at the beginning this time. Ooh, we're going to be different.
Oh, mixing it up.
I'm going to mix it up. So, let's get into it. I'm really excited about this episode.
Okay, I am too. It's Black History Month because it's February.
Yay!
Also my birthday month. But this is more important. But we are getting it started with something that's super interesting and something that is incredibly formative in world culture, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
So let's get started.
Yes.
It's 1922 in the Bronx, New York City. A young couple is on their first date.
Oh, Jimmy, tonight has been such a swell time. You're a real darb.
Sally, I think I'm getting stuck on you myself. Tonight has been a mighty fine time.
I don't want this night to end. You know what we need to do? Let's go dancing.
Aw, I'm not so good at dancing. I got 2 left feet, you know.
Jimmy, there is nothing like cutting a rug with someone you're sweet on. Come on, there's a new joint down the street that plays some sweet jazz.
Jazz? I never heard of that.
Jimmy, I cannot explain it, but once you hear it, you feel it. It's a real whoop-de-doo. You got your trumpets and your drums, and it's such a foot tapper.
All right, Sally, I can't say no to you. Let's go dancing.
She says Jimmy a lot. Jimmy?
Jimmy? Sorry. Almost every one of her sentences start with Jimmy. My bad,
She's
sorry.
very animated.
She's very.
Jimmy!
I love you, Jimmy.
I love you, Jimmy. Let's go dancing, Jimmy.
Let's go dancing. Let's cut a rug, Jimmy.
My mama's name was Jimmy.
It was Jimmy.
Yeah. I just think of her.
Yeah.
I always forget that that's typically a boy's name. And I was like, my mama, Jimmy. And they're like, Jimmy? Yeah. Jimmy. Is that weird to you? You want to fight about it?
I'll punch you.
I love Mama Jimmy.
So today, to kick off Black History Month, we were talking about the history of jazz.
Jazz!
I will say, nothing against the genre itself. I'm not the biggest fan of jazz myself. I appreciate it for what it is. I know it's very difficult, and it hurts my brain because there's a lot of improv in it.
Yeah.
It doesn't always follow the same set of rules, and it makes my brain cry, but I do appreciate it, and there are some jazz songs I like.
Yeah.
And researching this episode has given me a new appreciation for jazz as a genre of music. Do you listen to jazz, Emily?
Not regularly, but when I do, I very much enjoy it. I love music that makes me feel things, so I'm sure I've complained about it on the pod before, but a lot of newer music that's very repetitive, very algorithm forward, just drives me up the wall. But like, if you get me in a song, I'm very emotionally in tune with music. So like, I could be listening to a song and crying, and the next one I'm like fist bumping and head banging, and music is emotions for me. So I do love jazz. It's probably one of my least listened to genres.
Okay. We'll say I've tried playing jazz before. I've tried to do a lot with music as a kid, and I've taken jazz clinics. I'm not good at improv myself. It does not work for my brain. But again, it's a very interesting genre of music. So let's get into it.
Yeah.
I got this quote from levinemusic.org, and I'm saying it at the beginning because I did my best, y'all. And this is the quote from Levine Music. Quote, "Any attempt to describe the history of jazz in a linear format is misleading because jazz didn't and doesn't happen that way."
That's fair.
So
it just kind of happened.
I did. And I did my best to have some kind of outline, some kind of narrative.
Yeah.
But just know that you can't really put jazz in a box.
Yeah, nobody puts baby in a corner.
No one puts baby in a corner, and no one can really define jazz. So what are its origins? And we've kind of touched upon jazz before when we talked about the history of New Orleans.
Yes.
And that is considered the birthplace of jazz. When, again, I'm not going to rehash everything we talked about New Orleans, but it was a true melting pot of cultures. One of the most diverse places in the continental U.S.
It's crazy, honestly.
All kinds of cultures come in together. And one thing that was happening in the 1800s in New Orleans, and we talked about it too, is called the Black Code, where people who were enslaved at the time, part of the code was they had Sundays off. And so what they would do is they'd gather in the square, and they would play music and worship and congregate and have fun on Sundays. That was their day off. They got to do whatever they want, and a lot of times they played music. I found an article that was written in 1952 by Russell Roth. The article is called On the Instrumental Origins of Jazz. And a lot of these really early instruments were percussive, that were probably handmade or just grabbed from whatever they could get. Wash tubs and washboards, whistles, maybe a banjo, someone could make one, skin barrel drums, boxes with sticks inside of them, or maybe bones, instruments made of animal bones and wood. So just kind of whatever they could get. And it started with a lot of that West African music that the people who were enslaved were bringing over when they came over to the U.S. And it also started combining with some other forms of music too. So when we start getting into the Civil War, marching band instruments started becoming a thing during the Civil War, like brass instruments, the clarinet, because one, it helped with morale, but also it helped with keeping time, keeping tempo, with drills. And then additionally, I didn't really see how it really came about, but at the same time, there was this style of music called ragtime, which is played on the piano. It's very, when you think of the silent films and stuff, that piano music is called ragtime.
And it's stuck in my head now.
And ragtime, it doesn't follow a steady beat. It's a little bit more syncopated, a little bit more razzle dazzle there.
They're winging it. In a very tasteful fashion.
Yes. So you got your marching band instruments. You've got your ragtime. The blues start making their way after the Civil War into New Orleans and Louisiana. And some other instruments that start coming in is the fiddle. Black communities make the harmonica and the kazoo, so you're adding more wind instruments. So there's just all kinds of different things. And you got spirituals and gospel music. You also have music from Europe, European chord progressions that are being added in. So you've just got a smorgasbord of all these different music styles and instruments and cultures blending together in this melting pot of New Orleans.
To have a time machine.
I know. And additionally, after the Civil War, and we've talked about it before, after Reconstruction, there was more of this liberation of people who were formerly enslaved in the Black communities and people of color. But then people in power who were white, really started just slamming in all these different laws, like Jim Crow and segregation. Ugh. I know, it's awful. Ugh. And so then these communities started coming together and finding something that they could still enjoy. And it's from all of this, from ragtime, marching band, blues, all these other things, we start to see the origins of jazz. Additionally, these forms of music a lot of them are associated with minstrel shows, which are also associated, for better or for worse, with Black performers or people in blackface. Folk music, again, the spirituals. Jazz, as a concept and as an art form, started kind of emerging around the late 1800s to early 1900s. We don't have a specific date, of course, but that's just kind of when this style started showing up. And then clubs started showing up in New Orleans. And then people would go in. And then when they were inside these clubs, like the clubs would have pianos. And piano started being added to jazz music. And piano is so integral to a lot of the jazz sound. So that started being added in, especially with like the ragtime. And I also saw this fact. There was a band called Papa Jack Lane's Reliance Brass Bands. And they were one of the most popular integrated bands.
Really?
Between 1890 and 1913.
Wow. What was the name of it again?
Papa Jack Lane's Reliance Brass Bands.
What a name.
I know. A lot of these are mouthfuls.
Mouthful. That's incredible. In the 1890s.
Mm-hmm. To 1913. Really before jazz even became like well established.
Right. Early. And it was integrated. That's incredible.
Yeah. So where do we get the term jazz? I found some information about, and I mentioned it when we talked about New Orleans. Mm-hmm. There's a belief that it came from the word jazz. Mm-hmm. But there's also references to the term jazz as a word used to describe something that was peppy or exciting across the country before jazz was even really named.
Well, I mean, if you think of the phrase that it's jazzy.
Yeah.
You got a jazzy thing.
Yeah. Or all that jazz.
All that jazz.
Yeah.
Like it's I guess looking from our point of view, you don't know which one came first, but it almost seems like maybe the term like that's a jazzy little thing, you know, came first, and then they just kind of adopted it because that was a good way to describe it. It was jazzy.
Yeah.
It was jazz. Yeah.
And that's kind of what is believed. So the first, from what researchers could find, is really the first time it's used in writing is in San Francisco about baseball by E.T. Scoop Gleason in 1913, talking about the San Francisco Seals spring training.
The Seals?
The Seals. And then its first printed reference to music in the Chicago Tribune is in 1915. They had an article called Blues is Jazz and Jazz is Blues in Chicago. And it didn't really start being referred to in New Orleans as jazz until in writing in 1916 with the Times Picayune. Or Picayune? Times Picayune. But anyway, they were writing about jazz bands, like JAS. Jazz bands and jazz parades.
Looks like Picayune.
Picayune. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
The Times Picayune was referring to this music, and it was being used for like funerals and parties and just parades and just in public.
Did they have a word for it before, or did they just kind of play it and go on with their lives?
I didn't really see any reference to be called something. And I don't know if I wrote it down, but the first recording of jazz music, it's referred to as foxtrot.
Okay.
So I guess it was like before I had a definitive label.
Right.
So one of the first people that have come up in terms of like one of, not maybe a founder, but one of the early people that became really notable for jazz, his name is Charles Buddy Bolden. He was a cornet player, and he really seemed to catapult this improvisation, and like he improvised blues tunes and common or popular dance songs. So he would like have the rhythm and he would just like mix it up, especially between 1895 and 1900. That's when he first started doing this. He is not the founder of jazz, but he's one of the earliest jazz musicians. He is called the first man of jazz, even though he wasn't, because it was,
well, I mean,
there's other people playing.
We have like the first lady of the presidency, so like he can be the first man of jazz.
First man of jazz.
He could be like a figurehead, almost.
Yeah, and he is considered one of the first major performers that his name was notable. Not only did he play cornet, but he was a band leader. That's another thing. Like jazz, like it's a group of musicians. It's a band.
Yeah.
From 3 performers to a big old brass band, which is my personal favorite because I love the sound of brass bands. He was popular in Storyville, which is an area of New Orleans. And other musicians at the time that were also popular were Mutt Carey, Bunk Johnson, Joe King Oliver, Jelly Roll Morton, Freddie Keppard, and Sidney Bechet.
Jelly Roll Morton.
Jelly Roll Morton.
Nice.
He was a very talented musician too. So what is it that makes jazz unique? What makes jazz jazz?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of improvisation. It's not you're not reading a piece of sheet music and playing notes on a paper. It's all about feeling. It's about what you want. It's about self-expression. There's syncopation, so it's not just following a steady beat like da 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 da. It's like da 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 da, like whatever you want.
Yeah.
There's no rhythm that you have to follow. You can have poly or irregular rhythms. One thing that's also really big that became more popular is that if you're playing an instrument, you have a solo. And that's one of the things that when I was doing a lot of music stuff and I had to watch a lot of jazz performances, every instrument would have their own solo in every single song for like at least 3 minutes. And I was like, I'm tired of listening to this. But this was also like children performing jazz, not like professional musicians.
Right.
So, I mean, they were good. I just could not handle it. But having your solo, and again, it's about musical freedom. It's about expression. And there's also call and response patterns. So like the instruments like talk to each other. And it's important to become popular and become famous, you need to have your own style, your own sound, your own almost brand of jazz.
Right.
So when did it start becoming popular? I mean, it is one of the bases of modern music today.
Really?
So it started spreading around the 1910s. There was popular jazz musicians started going out spreading the sound. Sidney Bechet and Joe King Oliver went to Chicago. That was one of the first places people went. The original Dixieland Jazz Band played in England in 1919.
Wow.
And Sidney Bechet performed in France that same year.
Wow.
So it's already starting to get worldwide. It came to Canada in 1914 via the Creole Band.
Okay.
And the first jazz recording was on February 26, 1917.
Wow.
It was called Livery Stable Blues by the original Dixieland Jazz Band. I did find an article that was talking about, this was an all-white jazz band. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it was at the time or like reflecting back on it, but this was an all-white jazz band playing music that originated in the Black community. Mm-hmm. So I don't think there was this discourse at the time because the early 1900s were racist AF, but it's definitely become more of a thing to reflect on. And despite the growing popularity of jazz in the early 1900s, it was hard for Black musicians to market and sell their own work. A lot of times they would have to hire white performers to like sell to labels and make records and stuff because they would not sell records if they performed their own music.
Oh my. I hate this.
Yeah. Something that did come out of it, though, that was very interesting. The Jewish community really got behind the Black community.
Wow.
They collaborated to make jazz music. When jazz started making its way up towards New York and like Harlem and the Bronx and all those places, there were jazz musicians that were trying to, like Jewish musicians, that had their own sound. And they're like, hey, like, we see that you guys are trying and you're not really making it. Like, let's work with you. And so they really collaborated. And Black musicians who did break the mold include Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, U.B. Blake, and Noble Sissle at the time. Wow. And those were, they composed and performed their own music.
Yeah.
By the 1920s, it was the predominant music.
In literally just a handful of years.
It swept across the nation. Every club, every dance hall, every bar, saloon, speakeasy was playing jazz. It was new, it was funky, it was fresh, it was cool, it was fun. Like, everyone loved jazz.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands. I don't know why I said this out of order. Going back to the collaboration with the Jewish community, there was actually a man named Al Jolson.
Yeah.
And he was a performer. He sang and stuff. And he actually starred in The Jazz Singer that aired in 1927. It was the first talkie motion picture.
Like ever? Mm-hmm. The first movie.
Like with
sound. Like what we would consider a movie now.
Yeah.
Was about jazz.
Was about jazz.
And had a Jewish guy in it.
Jewish star.
Insane.
I know.
What? I love facts like
know.
this.
I know. There was a man named George Gershwin, who's also Jewish. He composed Rhapsody in Blue.
Okay.
Which is one of the, like, big jazz songs.
Yeah.
I told Emily this fact earlier. There's a song called Ber mi bist du schein, and it's a English Yiddish jazz song.
Yeah.
It became super popular. It was written by a Jewish person, performed by Norwegian women, and then it was like translated into, or people thought it was like a form of like a German dialect. Nazis loved it until they realized it was written by a Jewish person, and they were like, "Oh, this horrible jazz! Shake my fist!" And then they were really racist about it because they're like,
"It's on you."
I know, and then they were really bad because they associate it with not only Jewish people but also Black people too, and
yeah.
The article I was reading, I was like, I'm not repeating that because I do not say those words.
Yeah. Oh, well, we can gather what you read.
Yeah.
So.
And then there's another person I'll bring up later named Benny Goodman. He's Jewish and a big band leader.
Yeah.
And he also very frequently collaborated and performed with Black musicians. He also had one of the biggest integrated bands at the time.
Wow.
So jazz's evolution through the years, because the jazz that we hear now is not the same as 1920s. It has continued to evolve. The 1920s is when it became its own specific genre.
Okay.
Some notable performers, some of which I'll talk about later: Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Count Basie. Those are really big ones. 1938, Benny Goodman performed at Carnegie Hall, which is like the concert venue. Jazz was really big up until the Great Depression, and then it started falling on the backside in favor of the big band sound, like the big brass bands that are just wah. And I had to look it up. The saxophone didn't really get introduced in jazz until the 30s and 40s with the big band.
Okay.
And swing styles. It's really associated with swing style music.
Okay.
Sidney Bechet and Coleman Hawkins were both saxophonists, and they really worked to integrate saxophone into jazz.
Right.
And it's still continuing and evolving. So here are the different subgenres of jazz. We have swing, that first emerged around the 1920s, gained more popularity in 1930s and 40s. It's very like the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da beat. Mm-hmm. You have jazz manouche from the 1930s in Paris. So it's French jazz.
Oui, oui.
Oui, oui. It's more acoustic.
Okay.
So it's more like strings and guitars. There's no drum beats. And this originated from Romani guitarist Jean Django Reinhardt and French violinist Stéphane Grappelli.
Okay.
We have modern jazz, which emerged in the 1940s, and this is very heavy on improvisation and musical freedom, so offbeat, off-scale,
do what you want.
Loosey-goosey. Then bebop in the 1940s. That's kind of swing music and scat. So it's like doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo-ba-doo. That's bebop. Latin jazz, that's Cuban and Spanish Caribbean influences and rhythm styles, plus traditional jazz.
Cool.
So you've got like the sound and composition and like instruments from Latin music.
Yeah.
It emerged in the 1940s, and this emerged from like Afro-Cubans and African Americans in Harlem collaborating. We've got cool jazz.
Cool. Okay.
In the 1940s, it was response to bebop. It's more classical, more restrained, more accessible.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more predictable. Free jazz, it started in the 1950s through Ornette Coleman. It is avant-garde. There are no constraints, no conventions, whatever the hell you want.
Just play.
That's free jazz. Just play and just
vibe with
vibe.
Just like let your soul come out through your instrument.
Yes.
Yes.
We've got modal jazz that emerged in the 1950s, and instead of having like chordal progressions like most music does, you're operating within a musical scale, which allows for more freedom because you don't have to have like dun 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 like chords. You can operate through an entire scale, including like minor keys and all that. There's hard bop.
Hard bop.
In the 1950s, it was influenced by gospel, R&B, and blues, and it was sort of bringing the soul back to jazz. We have jazz fusion in the 1960s, and this incorporated jazz, rock, and R&B, so just a little bit funkier. Miles Davis, which we'll talk about a little bit later, very important in the genre. He's important in all the genres, honestly. And the last one that was talked about is smooth jazz, and this was in the 1970s. It's more commercial, easy listening, more predictable and gentle, not as jarring, with a lot more pop and R&B influences. So it's just a summary of the different genres of jazz. And then, I mean, jazz continues to evolve to this day. We're going to get into some performers now.
Okay.
So I'm going to start with the top 5 most influential male jazz artists, because I have found a top 15 list and they're all men. So
of course.
I did find a women's list. So instead of talking about all 15, I'm only going to do the top 5.
Okay.
So number 5 on this list was Benny Goodman, who, again, I talked about earlier.
Yeah.
He is known as the king of swing.
Oh,
that
okay.
big brass band sound. Like
he
all the
looks like a dude that would be in that kind of environment.
I mean, I listened to one of his songs and it was so fun and just like, it was a good time. And, like I said, he has one of the first and most popular integrated bands in the 1920s. He was very against Jim Crow laws.
Incredible.
He refused to play in the South.
Wow.
He was so against
She was like,
Jim
screw
Crow.
y'all.
He's actually a really involved civil rights activist, too.
Crazy.
So, good for Benny Goodman.
Good for Benny Goodman.
Then we have Miles Davis.
Okay.
He basically started like every subgenre of jazz, constantly evolving his style. Extremely talented, clearly.
He is having a good time in this picture. He's got a leg up. He's just chilling. He's sitting in a chair. He's got his one leg over his other knee, and he's just playing.
Vibing.
Playing. It's amazing.
And he's very talented. I listened to all of these guys just to get they just are really good, talented musicians. Right. I don't know what else to say. There's Charlie Bird Parker Jr. He was an alto sax musician. He was really big in the bebop subgenre, and he also was a composer. Great improvisationalist and composer, and he's the one that kind of brought like, oh, jazz is for smart people,
right?
Kind of vibe.
Okay,
it's not just like for fun or dancing. Like it's
right. It's sophisticated.
It's
elevated. Yes. It is.
It's for smart people.
I did a lot of shoulder movements, guys, but like I feel like you know what I'm going for.
Yeah.
It's like, ooh jazz.
Then we have Duke Ellington. I think he's also just called the Duke. He was a pianist, composer, and band leader. He also played pop, gospel, blues, and classical music. Usually inspirational and influential. And the number 1, Satchmo, Pops, Louis Armstrong.
Of course.
He's
got the best smile. Oh,
he's got the voice. Like, I showed Emily one of his songs earlier. He's got the, oh gosh, can I even do it? Like, you got the meat. Like, I can't.
You know, you sounded like the receptionist #1 on Monsters, Inc. Mike Wazowski.
Mike Wazowski.
No, he's got the gravelly, the grumble, I don't know what you call it.
It's Louis Armstrong.
Yeah, he's one of a kind voice.
And amazing trumpet player. He popularized scat singing.
Yeah.
He actually influenced Frank Sinatra and Bing Crosby with his singing, and he inspired Miles Davis. And
he was a performer. Like, he got out there and
he just did his thing. The video we were watching earlier, he was clearly working very hard because he was sweaty.
Oh, sweating bullets. He had a towel wiping his forehead off.
Didn't stop him once. He just continued to sing and play his trumpet.
He was working hard.
Incredible.
So incredible.
So the top 5 female performers that I found were in a different list. I had to go searching for this list. Yeah. Peggy Lee, she actually performed in Benny Goodman's band. That's how she got her start.
That's crazy.
There's a song that she sings called Fever that released in 1958. Great song. Look it up.
It's sexy.
I played it for Emily. All these women that I'm about to talk about, sexy performers. Like, their voices are just so husky and sensual, and Dinah Washington is another one. She was very risque in her singing. She was really big in the 1940s. Yeah. Sarah Vaughan, she went solo in the 40s and became popular in the 50s. She's also very sensuous. Mm-hmm. Billie Holiday, also called Lady Day. She just has like such like a deep husky voice. Just incredible, amazing. And then Ella Fitzgerald. Everyone's heard of Ella Fitzgerald.
Yes.
She got her start in the 1930s, and by the 1950s, everyone knew who she was. Literally, a man named Norman Granz, who was her manager, developed his own record label just to record her and get her music out there.
That is incredible.
I also have some other female performers as well, because all those women are singers. We have Melba Doretta Liston. She was a trombonist, arrangist, and composer. She is super talented. I watched one of her videos, and she's just improvising on his trombone. It sounds so good. Like an angel playing this trombone. There's Valida Snow. She was known as the Queen of the Trumpet.
Okay.
There's a woman named Lil Hardin. And, like, I guess Lillian, but Lil Hardin. She played in King Oliver's Creole Band alongside Louis Armstrong.
What?
And they later married.
Oh.
And she's the one who pushed him to go on a solo career.
Oh. How sweet. Did they stay married?
I don't know. Let me see.
What a love story.
Okay. This is from Wikipedia. I'm skimming.
Lucille Wilson? Or Lil Hardin?
Lil Hardin. They did separate in 1931.
Okay.
Because so they separated in 1931. It may have been because he was having an affair.
Oh, no.
And then they officially divorced in 1938.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing Wikipedia. He was married to Daisy Parker before, then Lil Hardin, and then in 38, the same year he divorced Lil Hardin, he married Alpha Smith.
That's who his affair was with.
Ooh, the tea. And then that only lasted till 42, because in 42 he divorced her and married Lucille Wilson, and they stayed married till 71.
Wow.
Fourth time's a charm,
I guess so. Also, just talking about like women performing jazz, like when World War II broke out, all the men went to the draft. So all female bands, like jazz bands, became super popular because women were left. So, yeah, they became really big.
That makes sense. I mean, women really picked up the slack in every aspect of life during the war, and that is not limited to the arts at all.
It's not.
You still have to have a good time in some capacity, or you have an entire nation that's like going nuts.
Yeah, they need to let out some kind of steam.
Yes.
It's just like you can't be a functioning society without letting people let out steam in some kind of way.
Exactly.
I was trying to see things about jazz now. It seems just a lot more nebulous. I know like a lot of modern performers are like covering jazz songs.
Yeah.
Or like singing a lot. I saw mostly like singers, like popular singers. Like I know like I think La La Land was a movie.
Yeah.
And I think it had a lot of jazz inspiration.
Never saw it.
I haven't either. It just came up.
Yeah.
But on April 30th, 2011, UNESCO cited that day as International Jazz Day.
Oh.
So April 30th is International Jazz Day.
Okay.
In 2021, Miles Davis's Kind of Blue album was still number 3 on Billboard's jazz albums list. 61 years later.
What?
It was still number 3.
What?
Miles Davis was an icon.
Wow. What an incredible... And he just, like, the picture I saw of him, he knew it. He's just like, I'm just going to play a little number right here.
Yeah.
And then jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
Yeah.
There's an interview that I read from NPR with a man named Ted. There's a lot of vowels. And his name, Guia?
Okay.
I don't know if that's how you say it. Gioia.
Goya?
I don't know.
Okay.
But he wrote the book, The History of Jazz. He actually has several editions of it. And he, basically in this interview, he was like, you know, jazz, it's a change agent.
Yeah.
It's ever evolving, and it's a form of self-expression. So you can't really define it because it's so personal
to
every performer, and it's never the same.
You can't put like a definition to it. And even songs that are similar, they might have like a same chorus to get you to other solos and stuff like that. You're never going to play them the same twice because you're improvising half of it.
Right, exactly. And you're letting, from what little I know about improv, because I'm not good at it, you kind of just let your spirit guide you, you know? Like, you do what feels right, you do what feels good. It may not even always work, it may be a mistake, but you just keep going with it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. That's jazz.
That's jazz.
That's jazz.
And all that jazz.
And all that jazz.
Oh my God. Jazz is so influential to like everything.
It is.
Even in like modern music, you can kind of hear it in the background.
Yeah. And you just like, if it's not like a strict beat, you can probably consider it a form of jazz, honestly.
Yeah. I mean, it has a lot of I didn't realize that jazz had all those like sub genres in it. You know, like I just thought it was like jazz was jazz, but no.
It's got a lot of different types, and I'm sure even within the subgenres, like there's bleeding effects into different styles, or even none of the styles. I mean, that kind of stopped at the 1970s. So, I mean, I didn't see any modern subgenres, but I'm sure there's some type.
I'm sure someone could make it.
Yeah. So
this was incredible.
You listener, go out and make you a new form of jazz.
Yeah, go make some music.
Make the ancestors proud.
Yeah, let your spirit
let the founders of jazz fill you with inspiration.
Yes. Yes, the players of jazz past.
Yes.
Let them possess you for a while.
Play like Satchmo.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up really quick. I meant to look it up earlier and I got distracted. Why is Louis Armstrong called Satchmo? Oh, that's not nice.
What is it?
Hang on. I'm looking at on the Louis Armstrong House Museum website. Because this is, okay, how did Louis Armstrong got the nickname Satchmo? Louis had many nicknames as a child, all of which refer to the size of his mouth. Gate mouth, dipper mouth, and satchel mouth. During a visit to Great Britain, Louis was met by Percy Brooks, the editor of Melody Maker magazine, who greeted him by saying, "Hello, Satchmo." He inadvertently contracted satchel mouth into Satchmo. Louis loved the new name and adopted it for his own. It came from satchel mouth because he had a big mouth. That's so mean.
Oh my God. You know what? He took it in stride, though. He's like, that's hilarious.
I love Satchmo. So, all right. Now we know why he's called Satchmo. You're welcome.
Thank you for that.
I'm gonna copy paste that into my sources, just so if you want to look up the more information about Louis Armstrong, this is a link to his website or museum website, all about him.
Yeah.
So that's jazz.
And that's jazz.
That's jazz.
I love it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This was amazing.
Thank you. So happy Black History Month, everyone. Yeah. Sorry, I'm really tired.
We're so tired. It's
12:30 now a.m. We are sleepy.
We're very sleepy, and we have been staying up too late because you're here.
Yeah, last night was rough.
Yeah.
Last night was really hard. Yeah. I fell straight asleep.
Oh my gosh.
So let's do socials.
Okay. If you liked this, you can find us on Facebook.
Ill-Equipped History podcast group and page.
TikTok, where we have this great plan to make more of those.
Maybe someday at Ill-Equipped History.
Instagram
at Ill-Equipped History.
Email us at
illequippedhistory@gmail.com.
And last but not least, sometimes most important, Patreon.
Patreon.com/Ill-Equipped-History, where you get access to bonus episodes and maybe merch.
Come on, get the bonus episodes.
They're super fun.
Yeah.
We've got a few lined up that are going to be fun.
We do.
So, yeah, check us out.
Yeah, and just to give you kind of a heads up, it's like if we find some stories that are really interesting that are just not long enough, to be in a regular episode, we'll compile them
Mm-hmm.
if they all match. And then we tell you lots of short stories.
Yeah. And we go back and forth, and that creates a lot of good banter and
Yeah.
interesting conversations. And sometimes we talk about hysterical paroxysm.
Yeah. Dr. Brown, which hopefully can be one of our merch things. Because now we have merch.
Yeah.
That's...
We have our own stuff. We're buying stuff for us.
Yeah. It's all for us.
Just ours. No one else can have
Yeah.
it.
You'll have to ask if you want it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we have to design it and make it and
Ship it to
out.
you.
Yeah.
And you have to pay us, give us your monies.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Do jazz. Listen to jazz.
Listen to jazz.
Google
Play
jazz.
jazz. Google jazz.
Make new jazz.
Make new jazz.
Jazz hands.
You can't hear, but I'm doing jazz hands.
Yes.
We're both doing them. You can't see us or hear us doing them, but we're
Just
both
know
doing
we're
them.
doing them, okay? We're so tired. We've had wine. So
Thanks for listening.
okay, bye.